My grandma gave me $100,000 for college on my 18th birthday, but the next day my parents demanded I give them the money to pay off my spoiled brother's debts, so I refused and secretly left home. And they blamed me. I didn't pack a suitcase. I grabbed a backpack, my car keys, and left my childhood home before dawn. By breakfast, my parents were already rewriting the story, telling relatives I'd abandoned them for money. What they never admitted was what happened the night before. They sat across from me at the kitchen table and demanded the money my grandmother gave me for my future. Not for emergencies, not for survival, but to erase my brother's debts again. When I refused, the smiles vanished, the threats began and the house felt unfamiliar. I thought leaving would end it. I was wrong. That was the beginning. My name is Kara. I'm 30 years old now with a steady professional job, my own apartment, and a life that finally feels like it belongs to me. But for most of my life, I was the quiet one in my family. The easy one. The daughter who didn't cause trouble because I learned early that trouble only made things worse. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in a Pennsylvania city in a house that always looked put together from the outside. Trim lawn, family photos and matching frames, holiday cards sent on time. Inside, everything revolved around my older brother, Jake. He was 7 years ahead of me and treated like proof that my parents had done something right. Every decision bent around him. Every mistake softened. Every failure explained away. If Jake tried a new business idea, my parents talked about it like it was destiny. If it collapsed, they blamed the economy. When I worked late, saved carefully, or earned promotions, it was met with a nod and a quick subject change. "You're independent," my mother liked to say. It sounded like praise. It wasn't. The only person who ever truly saw me was my grandmother, Eleanor. She lived a few states away in a quiet Massachusetts town in an old house that always smelled like coffee and baked fruit. When I visited, she listened. Really listened. She asked about my work, my plans, the things I didn't say out loud to anyone else. Sitting at her kitchen table felt like exhaling after holding my breath all year. A few months before everything fell apart, she invited me to stay for a weekend. We cooked together, folded laundry side by side, talked late into the evening. On my last morning there, she handed me an envelope. She didn't make a speech. She just said, "This is for your future. You decide how to use it." It was a large amount of money. Enough to change my trajectory. Enough to help me pivot my career in a way I'd been planning quietly for years. I cried. Not because of the number, but because someone trusted me that deeply. I went home believing for once that something good could exist without strings attached. I didn't know my parents were already counting it as theirs. The shift happened so fast it almost felt rehearsed. The day after I came home from my grandmother's place, my mom asked if we could talk for a minute. Her voice had that careful sweetness she used when she already knew what she wanted. My dad was already seated at the kitchen table when I walked in. Jake leaned against the counter, scrolling on his phone, not even pretending to be interested. Mom folded her hands. "Your brother's been under a lot of pressure lately." I didn't respond. I'd heard that sentence my entire life. Dad cleared his throat. "The market's been brutal. Some things didn't go the way he expected." Jake finally looked up. "It's temporary," he said. Like that explained everything. They started listing numbers then. Debts, payments, bills that were coming due. I noticed how no one asked me how my visit with Grandma went. No one mentioned my plans. My future wasn't part of the conversation at all. Mom leaned forward. "We think the money Grandma gave you could really help right now." I blinked. "Help who? Your brother?" she said as if the answer were obvious. "Family helps family." The words landed heavy. I looked at Jake, waiting for him to say something. "Anything." He shrugged. "You've always been good with money. You'll figure it out." Something inside me tightened. That money wasn't for emergencies. It was for my career. Dad's jaw set. "You can adjust your plans. Your brother doesn't have that flexibility." That's when I realized they weren't asking. They were deciding. I thought about every time Jake quit something and landed softly. Every time my parents stepped in to smooth things over. I remembered being told to wait, to compromise, to understand. Understanding had always meant giving something up. I tried one last time to be reasonable. "Why is it always me who has to sacrifice?" Mom's face hardened. "Because you're capable. Because you're strong. Don't make this into a drama." Jake scoffed. "You're acting like this is some huge betrayal." My chest burned. "It is." Silence filled the room. Not the awkward kind. The dangerous kind. Dad pushed his chair back slowly. "You need to think very carefully about your answer." I understood the message beneath the words. Obey or lose everything that still connected me to this family. That night, I lay awake replaying the conversation. Not the money. Not the numbers. What hurt was how quickly my future became expendable. How easily they assumed I would fold. By morning, something had shifted inside me. I wasn't angry yet. I was clear. If I gave in now, I wouldn't just lose the money. I would lose myself. I said no the next evening. Just one word. Calm. steady. The reaction was immediate. My mom's voice dropped first. "Don't be selfish, Kara. We raised you better than that." My dad didn't raise his voice either. That was worse. "You're choosing money over your family." Jake laughed under his breath, already irritated. "You'll get over this. You always do." That's when the pressure turned into something heavier. My parents started talking about everything they'd done for me, about sacrifices, about how hard it would be for them if Jake failed. They spoke like my future was an optional luxury and his mistakes were an emergency. I felt myself shrinking the way I used to as a teenager, nodding just to end the conversation. I caught it this time. I pushed my chair back and stood up. "I'm not giving him that money," I said, "and I'm done explaining myself." The room went cold. Dad stepped closer. "If you walk away from this, don't expect us to keep pretending everything's fine." Mom crossed her arms. "You're being dramatic. You'll regret this." I went to my room and closed the door, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed, then buzzed again. Messages from my parents, from Jake. Guilt layered over threat. Love twisted into obligation. I sat on my bed and stared at the walls I'd grown up staring at, covered in photos that never quite felt like me. I realized something terrifying and freeing at the same time. They weren't upset because they loved me. They were upset because they couldn't control me. I waited until the house went quiet. No shouting, no slammed doors, just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant tick of the hallway clock. I pulled a backpack from the closet and packed slowly. Clothes, documents, my laptop. The envelope from my grandmother stayed pressed flat between notebooks. Every sound felt louder than it should have been. The zipper, the floorboard, I avoided instinctively. The click of my phone as I turned it off. At the front door, I paused. For a second, I wondered if anyone would notice, if anyone would stop me. No one did. The night air hit my face like a shock. I sat in my car with my hands on the steering wheel, shaking, breathing through it. I wasn't running away. I was choosing myself for the first time. I drove without a destination at first, just distance. By the time the sun started to rise, I knew exactly where I was going, and I knew there was no going back. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not at first. I drove until the sky turned pale, stopped at a quiet cafe just outside the city, and sat there with my hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee I didn't drink. My phone stayed off. The silence felt unreal, like the calm after something breaks. By late afternoon, I was pulling into my grandmother Eleanor's driveway in Massachusetts. She opened the door before I could knock like she'd been waiting. Her face changed the moment she saw me. Not shock. Not confusion. Recognition. "You came," she said softly. I didn't explain right away. I stepped inside, set my bag down, and let the door close behind me. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and something warm baking in the oven. It was the safest place I knew. We sat at her kitchen table, the same one where she'd handed me that envelope. My hands were shaking now. I told her everything slowly, carefully. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't raise my voice. I just told the truth. When I finished, the room was quiet. Eleanor didn't interrupt. She didn't rush to comfort me. She sat there listening, her fingers wrapped around her mug, her eyes steady. Finally, she said, "I wondered how long it would take." I looked up. "You knew I suspected," she said. "Patterns repeat when no one stops them." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at her backyard. "Your parents have been using money to avoid responsibility for decades, and your brother learned early that he'd never have to stand on his own." I swallowed. "They're already telling people I abandoned them." Eleanor nodded. "They called me this morning." My stomach dropped. "What did they say?" She turned back to me, her expression calm but hard. "They said you were unstable, that you took the money and ran, that you were punishing them." The anger I'd been holding finally broke the surface. "That's not what happened." "I know," she said. "Because if it were, you wouldn't be sitting here looking like you're afraid to breathe." She reached across the table and covered my hand. "You did the right thing coming here." I barely slept that night. Not because I was afraid, because I knew something was coming. It came the next afternoon. I was in the living room helping Eleanor sort old mail when the doorbell rang. She didn't jump. She didn't hesitate. She walked to the door like she already knew who it was. My parents stood on the porch. Jake was behind them. My mother's face crumpled the moment she saw me. "Kara," she said, rushing forward. "Thank God. We've been so worried." I stayed where I was. My father stepped in without waiting to be invited. "This has gone far enough," he said, scanning the room like he was inspecting property. "You embarrassed us." Jake didn't look at me. He looked at Eleanor. "We need to talk," he said. "This affects all of us." Eleanor closed the door behind them. The sound echoed. "No," she said. "This affects me." They all turned to her. Mom clasped her hands together. "We didn't mean for things to escalate." "You meant for the money," Eleanor said flatly. My father stiffened. "We meant for family support." Eleanor smiled slightly. "You meant control." Jake scoffed. "That's not fair." I'm trying to keep my business afloat with my money, Eleanor said. Silence. I spoke then, my voice steady. You told her I stole it. Mom's eyes flashed. We said you misunderstood. You said I ran off. I replied that I was irresponsible. Dad waved a hand. That's not the point. Eleanor turned to him. Then let me make the point clear. She walked to the sideboard and picked up a folder I hadn't noticed before. She placed it on the table and opened it. Every time I've helped you, she said. I documented it. Every payment, every bill, every excuse. My father's face went pale. I asked you years ago to stop enabling Jake. She continued. You promised me you would. Mom's voice trembled. We were just trying to help our son. You were avoiding consequences, Eleanor said. And now you tried to avoid them again by stealing your daughter's future. Jake stepped forward. She didn't need all that money. That was when Eleanor finally raised her voice. Not loud, sharp. She needed dignity. Jake froze. You've had chances she never did, Eleanor went on. And you squandered them. This was not your safety net. Dad slammed his hand on the table. You're turning her against us. Eleanor didn't flinch. You did that yourselves. She turned to me. Carrara, tell them. I took a breath. I said, no. That's it. I didn't insult you. I didn't threaten you. I just refused. Mom's eyes filled with tears. We raised you and I grew up, I said. Jake laughed bitterly. So that's it. We're just supposed to fail. Eleanor met his gaze. Yes. The word hung there. You will fail, she continued calmly. And you will learn or you won't. But I will not save you from the consequences anymore. My father shook his head. You can't do this. I already have. Eleanor said, effective immediately. I'm ending all financial support. There will be no more payments, no more covering debts. Mom gasped. You're choosing her over us? Eleanor looked almost sad. No, I'm choosing honesty over manipulation. Jake's confidence cracked. You're ruining everything. Eleanor's voice dropped. No, I'm refusing to be used. My dad turned to me, eyes hard. If you walk away now, don't expect to come back. I didn't hesitate. I already walked away. The room went still. Eleanor closed the folder. This conversation is over. They left without another word. Jake slammed the door on his way out. My mother didn't look back. I stood there shaking, the adrenaline finally draining from my body. Eleanor exhaled slowly and placed a hand on my shoulder. You're safe, she said. That night, we sat at the kitchen table again. The same table where everything began. She poured tea. I finally cried. Not because I'd lost my family. Because I'd stopped letting them take pieces of me. The next weeks were quiet. The phone calls came. The messages, accusations layered with apologies, layered with guilt. I didn't respond. Eleanor handled the rest. And for the first time in my life, the power dynamic had shifted. Not with shouting, not with revenge, with truth and boundaries and the refusal to keep paying for someone else's failure. The satisfaction didn't come all at once. It came slowly, like relief. The fallout didn't happen all at once. It came in fragments through half-heard conversations and second-hand updates that drifted in and then faded out again. Jake's situation unraveled quickly once the safety net disappeared. Without anyone quietly covering his bills or smoothing things over, his business collapsed under its own weight. He moved back in with my parents, carrying boxes into the same house where he'd never really been told no. This time, the doors didn't open as easily. Stress settled into the walls. Arguments replaced excuses. The money that had once flowed so freely stopped. My parents struggled too. They cut back, sold things they'd always treated as untouchable, took on more work than they'd planned at their age. For the first time, their choices had consequences they couldn't outsource to someone else. They tried to reach me at first angrily, then desperately, then with a rehearsed softness that felt unfamiliar. I didn't answer, not because I hated them, because silence was the only boundary they respected. Life at my grandmother's house moved at a different pace. Mornings were quiet. Afternoons were filled with simple routines. I helped where I could, not out of obligation but gratitude. The tension I'd carried for years slowly loosened its grip. I slept better. I laughed without checking the room first. I began redirecting my life the way I'd always wanted to. Making plans that didn't require permission. Thinking about the future without calculating how much of it I'd be expected to give away. For the first time, my success felt like mine alone. One evening, as we sat at the kitchen table, Eleanor looked at me and said, "They're learning." I nodded. "And if they don't," she smiled softly, "that won't be your burden anymore." She was right. The victory wasn't loud. There were no apologies that fixed everything. No dramatic reconciliation. Just distance, clarity, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that choosing myself hadn't destroyed my family. It had simply ended the illusion. And that was enough. I used to believe being a good daughter meant shrinking myself so everyone else could stand taller. I know better now. Setting boundaries didn't make me cruel. It made me free. Walking away wasn't abandonment. It was survival. If you're listening to this and feeling that familiar knot in your chest, the one that tells you you're always expected to give more, hear this. Love that demands your future isn't love, and choosing yourself doesn't make you selfish. It makes you honest. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. I read them. And if you want to hear more real stories about family betrayal and reclaiming your life, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one.